Mic and everything's working. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. This presentation's on drones and a bunch of the stuff that's kind of been happening in the past few years with those. The attack surface now includes the sky as far as we're concerned for cyber and security, though it has included the sky since World War I. So just a quick about me. I did a poli-sci degree at WVU, focused on intelligence and national security, got a GIS degree, got into database administration through GIS, ended up working for the government and as a contractor, not on anything cool. So just a quick thing about this, there are a lot of legalities around drones and flying them, particularly around weight. If you're going to fly anything, get your Part 107, don't do anything illegal. And I believe this is kind of an underappreciated threat that we'll be seeing in the coming years here and not just in a war zone on the other side of the planet. So just to quickly go over some terms, FAA refers to drones as small unmanned aerial systems, though I will just be using drones. Particularly, I'll be talking about vertical takeoff and landing, quadcopters. And particularly, we're going to be talking about perch and stare. These are drones that flight isn't their main function. Flight is just how they place. And they can be paired with solar panels, all sorts of equipment to basically get proximity and endurance. So the reason I say that we're in a drone renaissance right now is largely around the cost of making a drone yourself. I compared this to the Gutenberg printing press, which allowed for replication and easier production of books back in the 1500s. And today we have open source communities, Telegram, GitHub, Facebook, all sorts of groups online where people are iterating, designing drones with CAD software. You can download it and print it if you have a sufficient 3D printer. So it always starts with a printer, kinda. So what has changed in recent years that's allowed for this? Ukraine has had a lot of use with FPV drones. A lot of these are kit bashed together using PVC pipe or even a log, like a chunk of wood from a fallen tree. There's been a lot of weird stuff that people have come up with. The things that work are further iterated on. Things that don't work are kicked back to the drawing board or scrapped. And this is because of the internet. And you have hobbyists, engineers, military planners coming together to work on drones, and skips a lot of the traditional corporate government research and development cycles, which can take months or years, which they're getting better about that now. And it can reduce that down to weeks or even days. So we too can build large drones within legal limits. So the 3D printing market over the last 10 years has come a long way. Prices have come down. They're becoming more available. They're becoming better. A mid-tier Prusa or Bamboo Studios 3D printer has better quality than a high-end $4,000 printer 10 years ago. And the market for this is just continuing to grow. So, like I said, a high-end printer 10 years ago, it didn't have the capabilities of a $800 printer today, and even the high-end printers today are coming down in cost. So criminals have been using drones for a few years. ICE has started using them for dropping grenades back in, I think, 2015 or 2016. Cartels, particularly the, not even want to try to pronounce it, the CJNG, they kind of took out the Zetas, which were a big cartel, but they've been really big on pushing drones for use in primarily smuggling, doing reconnaissance on the U.S. border with Border Patrol and prison contraband. There have been Chinese nationals that have used smaller drones, usually off the shelf for, I believe, Norfolk and Vandenberg Air Force Base. There have been a few others. And even on the smaller side, you've had like more petty criminals using drones to case targets for robbery, surveillance to see how far away the police are. And in one case out in California, they actually used a drone to drive like FBI agents out of cover and concealment. So criminals are already using this. What happens in a war zone isn't necessarily going to stay there. Lessons learned there are going to propagate out through the internet to the rest of the world. That's been seen in a few places, particularly Mexico and South America. And we should be thinking about what might be coming down the road, particularly when it comes to critical infrastructure security, which I'll include financial institutions in that, and executive protection, because they might not always be targeting an organizational building. Like they might be going after a VIP, their home, where they might be staying at a hotel. So, everyone's familiar with war driving? Okay. So, I got into war driving back when I was in high school. Get a laptop in a car, GPS dongle, Wi-Fi adapter, go look for stuff. So, we're getting to the point that you can do that with drones. You can collect all sorts of information. You can feed it into a GIS application and make a map. And you collect a bunch of log files and you parse and look for what you're looking for. And that can be done with just today a Raspberry Pi and the right equipment. So we're familiar with like everything about wireless attacks and vulnerabilities and threats like we see traditionally. Like usually you'd be looking for like someone with a laptop, a Wi-Fi pineapple, sitting in a car out in the street. So how are using drones any different to this? Well, we have limited attention spans, especially in urban environments. People are looking on their phones, dodging traffic. There's all sorts of background noise, engines, motors, electrical things. We also have really poor senses compared to a lot of things in nature. I've had a few of my drones taken down by barn swallows or a red-tailed hawk. They can see it and hear it from probably over a mile away. We have a hard time seeing a small moving object at an angle 400 feet in the air. And unlike barn swallows and hawks, we also are subject to cognitive bias. No one's going to use a drone to go after my organization or whatever it is I'm protecting. They're going to be in a van out on the street or walking around with a backpack. And as drones become more common, oh, it's just a delivery drone, it's Amazon, it's DoorDash or whatever, like emergency services, power company. And they'll just overlook it and think it's supposed to be there because no one uses drones for any nefarious purposes. So it's not really any different. So what is old is new. It's just a new vector for an old thing. Security exists in 3 dimensions. Signals propagate out, overpowered, misplacement of wireless access points. This is the chemical plant across the river. They have pretty good physical security there. Vehicles are subject to inspection. They have fences, guards, but do they have inward-facing cameras on the top of the chemical tanks? I don't know. So what do you get when you cross a drone, a microboard, a solar panel, and an LTE modem? You get what is called the ZDUN. These have been popping up in Ukraine, usually solar powered. Typically it's just a self-placing landmine, but they've increasingly have used them for signal repeaters for radio and controlling other drones. This one here is on top of what appears to be a water tower and also appears to be made out of PVC pipe. And this is likely a signal repeater. And if you weren't in a war zone and kind of paranoid and looking for stuff like this, you'd think it's supposed to be there. It looks kind of like a weather monitoring station. And any work of art like this done is going to have like its government counterpart, its imitation. The British came up with this one that actually has adhesive feet on it. It can flip at 90 degrees, stick to a window, suctions, releases glue. Has a solar panel, can loiter for an extended period of time, and actually has a heating element where it can detach and replace itself somewhere else. And this thing probably costs tens of thousands of dollars, where the Russians in Ukraine have been doing this with trash. So there have been a few documented cases of using drones and Wi-Fi pineapples. In 2022, this was one of the more talked about ones online then. They used high-end DJI drones to fly a bunch of equipment. And there have been a few places that have been talking about this. Threat Locker talked about this last year. Glitch Tech talked about this in 2018. I believe someone over at TCM Security, I think it was Angela, she was doing something with this a couple years ago. So it isn't really a new concept, but I think we're going to see it more. The big thing with this one, though, is they used a very large commercial-grade drone. It was detected, and it was very expensive. So most of the money was because of the Matrix 600 Pro, but do you need to spend $15,000 to do this? And I don't really think you do. So getting into homemade drones, I've said before what can be done with the drone is limited only by the laws of physics and the human imagination. What I mean by that is, what do you want it to do? Where do you want to do it? And is it capable of reaching that location with what you need it to carry? You have battery life. If it's too heavy, it won't take off. You also get into ergonomics, aerodynamics. That's more with fixed wings. Quadcopters, you could strap rotors to a log and fly it. And all you really need is a sufficient 3D printer. I have a Bamboo P1S. You can find a lot of these files, usually for free online or very cheap. Off the parts that you'll need, there's not a micro center here, but if you live near a micro center, you can find one. You can find all this stuff there. You can go on Amazon and find this stuff. There are plenty of hobbyist websites for like RC racing that you can find a lot of this stuff fairly cheaply too. So the current project I've been working on has been a very large Perch and Stare. It's a Titan Dynamics Avenger. You can't really get those files easily anymore because they got a government contract and don't sell to hobbyists anymore. But I'm kind of wanting to play with seeing how big of a payload I can get and how far I can get it to reach. The only drawback is it's decent bit bigger than a quadcopter. So the reason I've been doing this, largely out of boredom. I've been into drones since 2000s, 3D printing almost as long. I got laid off at the beginning of the year, took a nice severance, been working on rehab. I had brain surgery last year, so I've been dealing with that. And I was like, well, I've got time on my hands, like I can actually sit down and build a drone. Had to learn a lot of stuff like CAD, Fusion. That's primarily what I've used. Ton of wiring work. I've done more soldering this year than I have since I was a kid, taking apart things and putting them back together. And if I can do this in relative comfort here, and there's a guy in Ukraine in a Connex box in a trench who's been doing this, like I should be able to come up with something. And it's been fun. Like flying drones is fun. So I actually have thought about a scenario, and this is actually the first version of the talk came out of this, of how I would do it. So, duos in on everything, look for how I would hide the drone, paint it the right colors, disable any tracking on it, especially if it's a homemade. You don't need to put a transponder in it, which is a crime. I would do it in the early morning, somewhere after midnight before dawn. Good weather, and I would just start scanning. If I went the direction with a Wi-Fi pineapple, you could do a lot of other stuff. So I would come in, new moon, this time of year, hypothetical, clear skies, dark night. I would try to see where any camera angles are, where guards are, and I would land on the roof of the solar panel. In this scenario, though, for segueing into the next thing, birds are really territorial, especially this time of year with owls. Most raptors nest this time of year. So I want to say, yeah, I flew this in low over the tree line. It got taken down by a great horned owl. So you get a drone that you find out in a parking lot of your area, your organization. So what do you do with it? So there are challenges with doing forensics on drones. There are a lot of different brands. They'll have proprietary file formats, coding. Crashes can destroy what you would be getting information off of. And you're going to have to make existing forensics tools work, like shoehorn in to get the information off the drones that you want. So there are some tools out there. The really good ones are expensive and are kind of limited to law enforcement and government. But there are some free stuff out there, like Drone Extract, some things that aren't really meant for forensics, like Mission Planner, Griffin, and Log Viewer. So Drone Extract is for DJI drones. You can actually pull a decent bit of information off with this, and this is on GitHub. For things running ArduPilot or Navilink or anything, running off of a flight controller like SpeedyBee or OrangeCube, you can actually go on the website and drag and drop the files and recreate like a 3D flight path of where the drone went. And for forensics on what the drone is carrying, it's usually when you're running Linux of some type. Raspberry Pi is going to be running Debian. You're most likely it's going to be Kali. So that would just be normal forensics for Linux. And for smaller drones, you can also do range, estimating the range. It weighs this much, or it's overloaded. It could only have flown so far. So you can go on a map and start guessing where it was likely launched from. Drone vulnerabilities, I went to DEF CON, and I pretty much lived in the aerospace village this year. Nicholas Alex has a bunch of stuff for damn vulnerable drone. And it goes through all the attacks on there. It has a full thing that you can put on a bare metal Kali system for it to work ideally. Or you can also run it in a 2D mode with through a VM. Black Hills also came out with something a few weeks ago with Wi-Fi Forge. I believe it's a Lab 12. You actually go through hacking the wireless on a drone, do a DOF attack, and the goal is to crash the drone into the ground. So detection's another area where drones are kind of complicated. They're small, move fast, and really one of the big things is going to have to be some kind of unified system. I think AI is going to be handy for this in a few years. Outside of the mill space where they're probably already working on that. So they're hard to see. You need a camera to see them. You can use IR. You have compact radar stations. A lot of the times they have limited range. Some places put these up around concerts. Acoustic sensors have been a big one, but you can't really use those in a urban environment. It's too much background noise. You probably need AI to filter out a lot of stuff. Ukrainians have had a lot of success for drone detection using acoustic sensors. And then you've got radio frequency and antennas. A lot of this stuff can actually be done here. I have a spectrum analyzer, and you can actually pick up drones, because drones, when they take off, they have like a frequency spike. You have the direction they're coming from, likely with the operator. So, getting into wrapping up, you can't jam drones domestically. It's a crime. You also can't shoot them down. Also a crime. They're small, fast. Radar often mistakes them for birds. They're going to be hard to hear. They're hard to trace. And there really isn't any like affordable commercial unified detection system out yet. That'll probably be coming out in the next year or two, with a lot of companies working on that with government contracts. And drones are going to become more normal. People are going to get used to seeing them around. So what you can do, scan them, like the case that I used here, carrying a Wi-Fi pineapple, just treat it like a rogue access point. Do physical checks, go up on the roof, look for things that are supposed to be there and things that are not supposed to be there. Put up some high-res cameras. So there are use cases. Corporate espionage is one. Criminals have been using this pretty extensively, and of course state actors. We've been seeing a lot of this, especially over in Russia and Ukraine. So there's also implications for red and blue teams. Red teams, I think, should start thinking about integrating drones into a lot of the stuff they do beyond recon, and blue teams should start preparing for dealing with this. So where I think we're going in a few years with particularly kit bash drones and a lot of stuff, I think we're going to see some weird stuff like the log drone or the floating perch and stare system here, which I believe is counter drone interceptors that float. We're going to see more use of AI in drones, even at the commercial level and hobbyist level and homemade. The Ukrainians have been using a lot of machine learning and image recognition. The Russians have been putting birds on their drones to throw off that image detection. The Ukrainians have been having to go back and like update their models and everything, so their drones will continue to intercept Russian kamikaze drones. So that's the end of this. I will make this available online. The slides are available online. Links to my socials, like anyone can go ahead and connect with me. I love talking about this stuff. Just a bit more about me. I did federal procurement before going into cybersecurity. I did program planning for a cybersecurity team. So I was doing vulnerability management for about 4 years. And before that, I was in the artillery, did hazmat operations, and was a bouncer at a bar in Morgantown. So, any questions?
Yeah, a couple of comments, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're only limited by your imagination.
Yeah.
And I would say that I think you're limiting yourself. Let me explain. Have you ever heard of the project Loom? L-O-O-M.
Sounds familiar. I don't think so, though.
It was an old Facebook project when they were fighting with Elon to get internet to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But satellite, low Earth orbit satellite. Project Loom was using permanent drones, gossamer, fiber type stuff, with solar panels that never came down, very rarely came down. If you think of them not as widespread internet providers, but as narrowcast figure eighting over a target, they're never low enough to be picked up on an acoustical sensor or anything except when you're seeing the view come down. That's number one. Okay?
Okay, I have to remember that point, because I just thought of something.
Cool.
No, go ahead.
So you're thinking of small, disguised camouflage. I'm saying don't bother, just go high. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like this is stuff that like you can build. Like I've been building a few of these.
I get it. I just wanted to throw that out there just because I thought you were.
Oh, yeah.
Secondly, I've worked with some companies doing some of the drone detection stuff and everything else. So Dragorn, you know Dragorn?
Yeah.
Kismet?
Hmm.
He's now working for Hack5. He's one of their prime programmers. He's just increased the capacity of the Wi-Fi pineapple ridiculously. Like ridiculous.
I think that I actually talked to the Hack5 people at DEF CON about that because they just did come out with a new Wi-Fi pineapple.
Yeah, and the hacker pager and other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been almost since DEF CON. I talked to Greg at John Con a couple weeks ago, and it's amazing stuff. You should really give them a go. And the capacity of the small Wi-Fi pineapple is the hacker pager version,
Mm-hmm.
but that now has the abilities of the original big Wi-Fi pineapple. So the size, the weight is significantly decreased.
Yeah, I was actually looking at that and thinking about this project when I was out there because it's only like that big. Like, it's smaller than a deck of cards.
It's tiny, yeah. And thirdly, the fiber optic drones in Ukraine are going to be interestingly an issue here.
I think that'll be when they figure out how to actually jam drones here, because with the fiber optics, all you have to do is just follow the cable back to where it originated at.
What you can do is get it over there, and the Ukrainians are doing this a little bit. You get it to where you want it to go, and then have it cut the cable. Then you can put a cutter on the drone, and then just it'll self-drop to where it needs to be, and you can still have some home signal, on inertial.
I think we'll see some of that stuff down around the border, especially. The one thing you made me think of, there's been a lot of stuff with drones and MeshNet. Controlling the drones that you have, like your mothership drone carries like 6 smaller ones, flies out, drops those, and those are being controlled from that because the bigger one has longer range. I was actually talking to someone from Teal Drone, and they're working on something along that lines for inspecting oil pipelines out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, that's terrifying. Keep the mothership over the prison and have 6 dorms to visit. Sorry, thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else?
Are you aware of any red teams actually using it?
I've only talked to one person who's used it for red teaming out at DEF CON. I'm sure other people are using it, and kind of the thing with the 3 cases of the Wi-Fi pineapples going after financial institutions. They're kind of sloppily done. That's why they got caught. Like having a drone hovering outside the 30th floor window of some guy's office, you're going to get caught. There's probably people out there doing a lot of this and they're not getting caught. Like that'd be my bet. And I would say that people are using this for red teaming because it kind of makes sense now. But yeah, if I know of one person who's used a drone for red teaming.
So are most of these things something that you're tracking through an app, or do you suggest like FPV, or where do you draw that line? Because I'm assuming FPV's got more weight, more power consumption, things
Yeah.
like that involved, right?
With that, it depends on the flight controller you're using. The FPV stuff, especially if it has the gimbal and more antennas on it, it adds a little bit more weight. There is a little bit more power draw, but like it's not really that significant. And if you're having a payload on there, you're probably going to, like a Wi-Fi pineapple or Raspberry Pi or anything, you're most likely going to be running a power buck off the drone's battery to save weight. And that's going to greatly diminish the battery capacity of that drone. But if it's like going up, perching and staring, has a solar panel on it for trickle charging, kind of not really that big of an issue, but it does limit the range significantly. That goes back into the what do you want it to do and where do you want it to do it at.
Just thinking for like out of line of sight,
Mm-hmm.
object avoidance, that type of stuff, like FPV or everything.
It is, and there's actually a lot of really good cameras that are coming out. I think CADX just came out with a new thermal camera that's actually really affordable. It's only a few $100 instead of like being a few thousand. FPV, I use Walker Snail, I think is what the brand is. It's kind of skipping my mind at the moment. But with flight planning and a lot of the automation, like the RD pilot and stuff, you can automate a lot of the flight paths, elevation, and where you want it to land at. And with Orange Cube, you can actually integrate a Raspberry Pi companion computer with different circumstances for it to do different actions.
For someone who might be a student or somebody who hasn't started in this space but wants to develop a home lab, what kind of price point are you thinking for an initial investment? And I'm also thinking in comparison to somebody wanting to get into like web app pen test and you just spin stuff up for free. So what kind of price point are you looking at?
So there is a little bit of a price point. You're going to need, if you want to print your own, 3D printers, a few $100s, like you can get a low-end one for a couple hundred, but you're likely to be spending about $800-900 for a good one. The flight controller is going to be another couple hundred, so the goggles, 120. The electronics internal to the drone, actually surprisingly cheap. Batteries are kind of expensive depending on what you go with. If you use the Samsung camera batteries, you can actually make your own battery packs to save money, but you're looking at about $1,200-1,500.
Just for an initial home lab, like to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
But once that's done, you don't have to respend that for every drone you build. It's just going to be the parts and material to build that drone.
I went to use Brookdale downstairs, and there's 20 booths of the local libraries, saying please don't use that when you finish the break.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I forgot to think about. Like a lot of like places are getting, like libraries are getting 3D printers, and I know that was a big thing I read in the newspaper here when they did that a few years ago.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I had no idea. Do you think that's occurring also around the United States, or do you think it's local here?
No, I live up in Pennsylvania, and my local libraries do it all the time.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm from Ohio, in a college where I used to teach at, and they invested so much money about a decade ago, and now it's like you draw students in to learn that concept, they're letting them use it for free.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
It's changed a lot in the past decade, but.
Go ahead.
I saw you listed flight array on there.
Yeah.
You actually use those?
Yeah, I've built a Stallion VTOL. I have the Moose and I have the Stork models.
I've actually, funny you listed that up, literally in the last 2 weeks, been shopping your site quite a bit, trying to figure out which one I want to try. I've got 17 printers at home, I've got a small print on.
I would go with the Stork for like the first build. It's one, I think it was their first model they came out with.
Yeah, it's very, very basic.
And it's very basic and it prints easily. The Stallion is another good one. That one has some weighting issues. You actually need to get the center of gravity really accurate on that, otherwise it starts to wobble really bad.
The one that I was looking at was their first generation fixed one. You know what it's called now, but it's very, very basic.
I know which one you're.
It's essentially just ailerons and a prop,
Yeah, I think it's like what is that? I think it's the Talon.
something like that. Yeah.
The Moose is a good model. That's their latest one. I actually haven't gotten around to printing that one out yet. I did just get a hold of like one of my friends down in Florida who's going to try to make like a carbon fiber mold for pressing those into carbon fiber. So I'm wanting to see how that is because carbon fiber is a superior material. 3D printed drones, a lot of the filament is very fragile. Like it will crash and it will collapse, even if it's ASA Aero or anything like that. It'll still crumple, but
Orientation into a mold.
yeah. But it'll still fly.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thanks for coming to listen to me drone on about this. Like I said, connect with me on LinkedIn or anything. Like I love talking about this stuff is kind of, I guess, what I do now.